I'm the one that won it. And I said, no, I know him. I'll do it for free. And here's the conditions. On the 10th, 01, I come in, we hold a press conference, and on the 11th, give me a team to go into the black community and tell black folks who this man is and take him to the polls. And I called my wife that night and said, babe, well, you got me sleeping tonight. I live in Massachusetts. She said, you're not. A friend of yours called and said, don't spend the night in New York tonight.
Whoa, stay there. We got to come back. Got a call. Get out of New York. We'll be right back. Amazing. Dick Gregory.
We're on the march. The empire.
We're going to get into President Obama and what Dick Gregory thinks of the work he's been doing here in just a moment. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Alex Jones. The websites are Infowars.com and Prisonplanet.tv. Notice here in Dick's bio, there's really no websites to plug, but I should ask him. I know he's just out there promoting peace and his view of the world. Love him or hate him, you've got to admit the guy's consistent and certainly an open mind and a great comedian in his own right. And he's a living history book. He's seen so much. Mr. Gregory, you were getting into the fact that a friend called because you're asking, hey, where am I sleeping in New York? If folks just joined us. In your own words, recap that and continue.
Well, I called my wife the night of the 10th, and I said, hey, dear, well, you got me sleeping tonight. She handles all my hotel, train. She said, you're not. Your friend called me and told me the name. He said, don't spend the night in New York tonight. So I trust him. I know who he is. I know what level of consciousness. So I go to the train station and get me a train out coming to Washington, D.C. And midnight. I get here at 4 in the morning, and I can't wait to get off the train to call this friend of mine. So I called him, and there's nothing you can say on the phone. I said, how'd you know I was in New York? He said, we picked you up on the satellite, brother. So I don't know what was going to happen. Many of us been knowing about blowing up the World Trade Building. I didn't know the date. There were some people that knew that. I didn't know the date. It's called Operation Binko. That's how long we knew about it when we busted some folks in the Philippines and found it in their hard drive. So all this old stuff that and all that's the game that they played.
Yeah, Bojinko.
Yeah, and so consequently, I go home and I call some folks from my apartment and say, man, I wasn't planning on being here in D.C. And in D.C., we walk every morning at like 5 o'clock. So I said, sit it back an hour, and I'll meet you in the park. And so when I get back home, my wife and one of my children had called me and told me a plane had hit the World Trade Building. I'm thinking like one of them Piper Cubs like we saw in King Kong, right? And so while I'm getting dressed to meet them for a talk about a demonstration at the Capitol, I see the other plane hit the building. I said, oh. So now I called my friend who tipped me off, and I said, wow. And all he said is, you owe me one. You don't talk on the phone, right? And so now I start watching everything. Now I shut down. I called Leo and said, I'm out of circulation. I called a couple of researchers, said, put on every TV you got in your house and watch it. And then so all at once now, the second plane hit. Now I'm going to ask you a question, those of you that's listening. If you work for NBC or CBS or ABC, and you was the one that captured that picture of that second building being hit, you would have a Nobel, you would have a Pulitzer Prize, you'd make $40,000 a speech, and your name would be world-renowned. How come we don't know the person that took that picture? It's just simple deduction. How come we don't know the person that took that picture? Now I'm looking, and I know what to look for. I know when the stuff hit, you're dealing with people's emotions. You can put all kind of stuff down. Then you get the Pentagon. Okay, it got hit, right? Well, now let's look. The Pentagon, that plane came in 6 feet off the ground. How you going to have a plane doing 6 feet off the ground doing 450 miles an hour? That's impossible. You can't do that. But let's say it did. Now, if you know what a Pentagon is, and you move out from the Pentagon, you got the highway, and you keep moving, you got Arlington Cemetery. In order for a plane to hit the Pentagon, it's 6 feet off the ground, it had to come through Arlington Cemetery. there's not one tree or lamppost knocked down in Arlington Cemetery. Now, one of the tricks they'll do is right after something happened, you got a cab driver say, yeah, I saw it come in, and I was scared. You don't know if that's an agent or not. You don't know who that is. They've already got people playing of what they're going to say. You think they're just some order. And one of the things that's going to bring this country down to its knees is a handful of cops. I'm not talking about these ones we see in the street that know that homicide, when they call it suicide and all that, they know it. And the news media knows it. I'm not talking about these reporters. I'm talking about the news media that put the tricks down and feel this out and say so-and-so saw this, they don't want their names. And so when you sit and you look at that whole Pentagon, now here's another thing. There was 5 buildings, 0 to be hit, 5 places. The World Trade Building, the White House, the Pentagon, the Sears Tower, and the big bank out there in San Francisco. Now, here's something that's interesting. Now, if nobody knew this, then why is it that nobody evacuated Baltimore? I mean, you're going to hit the Pentagon and supposed to hit the White House, and all the government activity that go on in Baltimore and all the way up the 95th corridor. You got the space headquarters and all of that. Nobody evacuated that. Nobody evacuated Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. How'd you know? I mean, how did you know it was just going to be those? And then when you go back into Chicago, they evacuated the Sears Tower. We knew that was on one of the zeros. Right down the street is the Standard Oil building, was just a couple of stories shorter. Then how come nobody evacuated that?
Because they knew what the targets were.
They knew what the targets were. And so I'm saying, when you sit, and my poor mother and grand, if they was alive, they'd be duped into it too. And so when you have that kind of hardcore, now, for those of you all that's listening, let me tell you what you need to do. On September the 11th, now in America, we don't list state by the number, the month. We say September, Halloween, October 31st. Why they use a number for that one? Because it's 911, and anytime you don't say September the 11th and you say 911, it tells the brain to be scared. Okay?
That's right.
For instance, if any of you all listening walked into your house this evening and someone was on the phone, your mother, your father, your wife, your children, and you said, who are you talking to? Said, I just dialed 911. What kind of look comes over your face?
Listen, when I see 911 on a clock now, I see it as an ill omen. They did it as they even picked a number to program everybody. The passports magically survived. Hijackers trained at U.S. bases. But I got to go back here because I hadn't heard you talk in this much detail about what you just discussed. Dick Gregory, a civil rights icon, is our guest if you just tuned in. But there is something of what you speak on record. Mayor Willie Brown.
Yeah, wait, wait.
He admitted that he got warned.
No, let me handle that, would you?
All right.
That's what I was getting ready to tell your listeners. Pull up the San Francisco Chronicle on September the 12th, the next day, September the 12th. And that's where they had a front page story where Willie Brown had been told by his bodyguard not to take his flight into New York City that Tuesday. Now, I don't have no problem with that. I got a problem with this. When a reputable newspaper, as far as newspapers are concerned, not one other newspaper ran that story,
It slipped through that he was told don't fly September 10th on September 11th, and the reported person that told the bodyguards that made the call was Condoleezza Rice.
Hey, we all knew that, huh?
Wow, well, right there, don't fly to New York, but they didn't know anything about the attacks.
But no, that don't bother me. What bothers me is who told the New York Times. They print stories out of papers. Oh, God, man, if a pimp walk up there, if the San Francisco Chronicle report a pimp shot 5 prostitutes to death and beat their mothers to death, that story would run all over the world. Okay?
Yes.
Now, how come not one newspaper ran that story? Okay? Now, go back to that Friday, which was Tuesday was the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. The Friday, San Francisco Chronicle, the ex-Secretary of State, George Schultz, said he knew 7 days before.
That's right.
The front page story. Okay, so we're not talking about a mayor. We're talking about the ex-Secretary of State.
And as you know, Dick, he's a major kingmaker, at some levels, some believe even higher up than even Kissinger, at actually calling the shots. I mean, he's a guy who knows where all the bodies are buried. And then there was also what an Associated Press blurb that the Joint Chiefs of Staff canceled flights to New York for September 11th. Yep. I mean, so they all knew, and these are real articles. Colonel Stephen Butler was told, said that they trained some of the people on the hijacker list at their base. He said the government was behind it, and they started the move to court-martial him until he shut up.
Sure.
So we'd be crazy. 9/11, the government was absolutely conscious and let it happen bare minimum.
Well, you know, here's what they'll do. They'll come out 50 years from now and admit certain things, and then people overlooked it and this and that. But now let me just show you something else. I had a friend of mine. I said, do me a favor. I want you to look at all the flights on a 5-day period, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Look at it for 2 years. All your major flights coming out of Hartford, Connecticut, going to the West Coast. Coming out of Boston Airport, going to the West Coast. Coming out of Kennedy, going to the West Coast. Coming out of Philadelphia, direct nonstop flights. Coming out of Washington, D.C., Dulles, going to the West Coast. And here's what we found out. We found out that on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that if you wanted to book a first class from any of those airports going to the West Coast, because you gain 3 hours, you gain a whole business day, you have to book about a month in advance to get first class, about 3 days in advance to get a seat on coach. That's every one of them flights. That day, all of those flights from Boston, going to San Francisco, going to L.A., from Philly Airport, from Kennedy, from Washington, D.C., all of those flights was about 34% full.
Yes.
Okay? So I'm saying when you sit... and
they all got tipped off. That's why there were kids locally saying those towers won't be there next week.
Yeah.
I mean, this was everywhere. And then there was that weird base in... it was up in Nebraska where hundreds of CEOs had been told, come to a special meeting a week before, and then they closed the hangar and showed them some video, and they all came out freaked out, and Warren Buffett was running it. I mean, you're talking about weirdness.
Well, very seldom somebody would tell you something that you don't know. But if you don't know this, look at this and tell your folks, those little training, where those Arabs were supposed to have gone taking their training in Florida.
Yes.
Those schools is owned by Warren Buffett. Did you hear me?
No, I didn't.
All right.
I mean, I heard you. I didn't know that.
Okay. That was owned by Warren Buffett, right? Now, let me just tell you something very interesting.